Hey guys, tonight we dive into the creaky floorboards and velvet-draped corners of the 19th century, where ghost hunters didn't just chase spirits, they packed for them. Picture this: twilight fog curling around a lonely Victorian inn, your boots sinking slightly into the gravel drive as you approach. The lamps flicker yellow-orange through leaded glass, and the wind whistles just enough to make you question your life choices. You're here for a seance weekend, a trend so popular among the well-to-do of the 1800s that entire resorts sprang up just to accommodate the fashionably curious and the spiritually frantic. You're carrying a trunk so heavy you're already suspicious of the afterlife. Are ghosts real, or did someone just sneak bricks into your luggage? The front steps groan as you step up, and an oily butler who looks like he's already passed into the afterlife takes your name, your coat, and half your dignity. The foyer smells of rosewater, pipe smoke, and very old upholstery, the classic scent of repressed emotions and upper-class ghost trauma. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop a comment below with where you're tuning in from and your local time. I love knowing and where you're listening. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step inside just as a grandfather clock strikes 8, the chime long and ominous like a cello being dragged through molasses. Everyone here is dressed in various shades of mourning. Deep black lace, satin gloves, button boots, the kind of outfit that says, "I'm here to speak to the dead, but also to be seen." Your fellow guests murmur politely as they sip from mismatched teacups and try not to look too interested in your arrival. The innkeeper's wife, who may or may not be an amateur medium herself, directs you to your room upstairs, warning you to avoid the third-floor landing after dusk. She doesn't say why, just offers a meaningful glance and vanishes down the hall in a swirl of lilac perfume and foreboding. Your room is small, drafty, and boasts a wallpaper pattern so floral it's practically hallucinating. But that's not the focus. You've got unpacking to do. You drop your travel-worn steamer trunk on the bed with a thud that sends a few ceiling flakes fluttering downward. Inside is everything a 19th century ghost hunter might need, or at least what the ghost hunting catalog said you'd need. You open it reverently, like you're unsealing a tomb, which, given the faint smell of mothballs and camphor, feels a little too on brand. First out, your seance cloak. Black velvet, lined with satin and tailored to billow dramatically when you spin. Not that you'll be spinning, but just in case the spirits need flair. Next, a pair of soft kid gloves, perfect for hand-holding in dark circles without the awkward skin-to-skin clamminess. You lay them gently on the bedside table beside your pocket copy of The Spirits, Harmonium, a guide to ethical ectoplasm. Beneath the clothing lies your delicate crystal pendulum in its little velvet pouch. Some guests believe it swings toward truth. You mostly use it to locate misplaced buttons. And finally, your prized possession, a box of carefully padded glass vials, each labeled in cramped ink essence of nightshade, lavender water, and one mysterious bottle marked only for thin veil moments. You've never dared open that. 1. A journal. Of course, because no respectable ghost hunter arrives without something leather-bound in which to record sudden chills, cryptic dreams, and the occasional sighting of Aunt Mabel from beyond the veil. Historians still argue whether such journals were genuine records of the supernatural, or just a very Victorian excuse to practice calligraphy and dramatic exaggeration. You look around and realize your fellow attendees are just as overloaded. A thin man with pince-nez and a nervous tic is wheeling in a full portable cabinet, its drawers rattling ominously. Someone else is struggling under the weight of 2 hat boxes, only one of which contains an actual hat. The other, she later confesses over sherry, holds a set of electromagnetic rods used to divert ghostly energies. You make a mental note to not sit near her at dinner. Outside, the last light fades from the sky. A single oil lamp flickers to life in the hallway, throwing wobbly shadows against your door. It's nearly time for orientation. You change quickly, pulling on your seance cloak over a starched white shirt and dark trousers. You debate the cravat. Does it scream serious, ghost hunter, or trying too hard? Ultimately, you tie it with a lazy knot and hope the spirits don't judge fashion. As you descend the staircase, you can hear voices gathering in the main parlor. The room is dim, lit mostly by candles and dripping holders, and smells faintly of wax, orange peel, and a hint of sulfur, the latter not necessarily supernatural. A chalkboard by the fireplace reads, "Welcome Spirit Seekers. Weekend agenda, orientation and introductions, spirit table demonstration, personal ectoplasm, calibration, midnight seance, weather permitting." You're already regretting the part where they assume you know how to calibrate ectoplasm. But you're here now, cloaked and committed. There's no turning back, not unless you want to face the haunted hallway again. So you ease into one of the overstuffed armchairs and wait, watching as the others settle in with their props, journals, and very serious faces. Somewhere in the background, a harp begins to play softly. Or maybe it's just the wind brushing the strings of an abandoned lyre in the attic. No one's really sure. The medium arrives last, of course. She doesn't walk, she drifts. Or at least, she makes it look that way. Her name is Madame Liriope, though it's widely suspected that her birth certificate reads something closer to Mildred Simmons from Portsmouth. Still in the candlelight, with her flowing layers of indigo silk and faint scent of sandalwood and lavender, she's convincing enough to hush the room. Her eyes are heavily lined, her voice a whispery purr, and her jewelry jingles with every careful movement. It's unclear how many bangles are on each wrist, possibly more than bones in her arm, but they catch the flickering light just so, adding a bit of theatrical shimmer to every flick of the hand. And then there's the wardrobe. The wardrobe. Tonight's robe is embroidered with silver-threaded moons and owls, cinched at the waist with a braided cord that likely hides more than a few spirit-enhancing trinkets. One guest swears she saw a playing card tucked into a hidden hem. Another whispers something about a retractable bell. You suspect both are true. She doesn't just wear clothes, she performs them. Her veils drift behind her like smoke, and you wouldn't be surprised if one of them tried to whisper a secret in your ear. Historians still argue whether the elaborate attire was intended to heighten psychic connection or just distract from sleight of hand. Either way, it works. She stands before the fireplace, dramatically backlit, and gestures for silence. "My friends," she begins, her tone somewhere between lullaby and funeral dirge, "thank you for joining me here at Briar Hollow House. This is not merely a retreat, it is a gateway." There is a soft "oh" from the woman with the hat boxes. A man in the corner sneezes, but in a reverent sort of way. Madame Liriope continues, explaining that over the next 2 nights, the veil will thin. Ghosts will reach out, spirits will speak, but only if we are dressed appropriately. She does not say that last part out loud, but it's implied by the small glance she gives to the man in the loud checkered vest. You glance around at the fashion parade. There are capes. So many capes. One woman has feathers. Another wears a tight corset with tiny skull-shaped buttons. A gentleman you'd previously taken for a footman now reveals his full regalia: black waistcoat, velvet gloves, and boots polished to a high shine, despite the muddy drive. His name is Dr. Wilberforce, and he claims to have trained in Paris under a man who once spoke to Benjamin Franklin's ghost. The medium asks everyone to form a circle for introductions. It's painfully awkward. No one wants to admit this weekend cost more than their rent. But slowly, the stories unfold, tales of lost relatives, strange dreams, haunted tea kettles, and childhood games of hide and seek that ended with ghostly whispers. You offer a vague anecdote about a chilly attic and a mirror that sometimes reflected things you hadn't done yet. It's just enough to pass. Eventually, someone asks about the wardrobe, the silks, the bangles, the veils. Madame Liriope smiles. Clearly pleased. Spirit contact is a matter of vibration, she says. Color, texture, sound. They align us with the spectral realm. The right garment can be the difference between silence and visitation. This prompts several guests to glance anxiously at their outfits. The man with the too many crystals necklace begins to wrap a paisley shawl over his shoulders with great urgency. One woman reaches into her valise and adds a second brooch shaped like a weeping cherub. You wonder, briefly, if spirits really care about velvet. Or if they're just bored and desperate for any kind of attention. Then she reveals something else beneath her robes, sewn into the lining, are secret pockets. One holds a tiny bell. Another contains a folded piece of silk said to have touched a spirit in 1872. There's a mirror shard, a length of braided hair, and a small bottle labeled Hecate's Tears, which is either perfume or vinegar. Historians still argue whether these pocket relics had actual ritual purpose or simply served as stage props to keep the audience intrigued. Someone asks about footwear. Madame Liriope raises a delicately arched eyebrow. Soft soles, she whispers. Always, so the dead can't hear you coming. You're not sure whether that's poetic or just practical. Probably both. She closes the circle with a gentle inviting everyone to take an hour to settle, meditate, or reveal themselves to the house. It's unclear whether she means emotionally or sartorially. Possibly both. You retreat to your room to consider your own wardrobe. Your cloak, you realize, doesn't have nearly enough hidden compartments. Maybe you can sew one in before tomorrow night's seance. For now, you add a sprig of dried rosemary to your lapel. It smells nice and might confuse the ghosts. Downstairs, a bell rings to signal dinner. As you prepare to descend once more into candlelit eccentricity, you glance into the hallway mirror. For just a second, you think you see a figure behind you, but it's only your cloak. You hope. Dinner, as it turns out, is as much a ritual as any seance. You file into the dining room with the other guests, brushing past velvet curtains and a faint smell of overcooked turnips. The long table is set with candle stubs and brass holders, mismatched china, and an alarming number of forks, none of which you know how to use for ghost hunting purposes. Your seat is between a woman named Agnes, who's already introduced herself 3 separate times with slightly different backstories, and a man who claims to have brought authentic Mesopotamian spirit stones, which look suspiciously like polished driveway gravel. He's wearing a monocle that keeps fogging up every time he breathes near the soup. The meal begins in polite silence, broken only by the clink of cutlery and occasional snort of someone trying to stifle a cough. But gradually, conversation turns to the real reason you're all here, the tools. Specifically, the fascinating, ridiculous, and possibly haunted devices people have packed for the weekend. One gentleman, with an elaborate mustache styled impressively into what appears to be wings, pulls from his lap a collapsible spirit trumpet. It looks like something between a gramophone horn and a novelty telescope, and he assures the table it helps amplify ghostly voices during seances. Historians still argue whether these devices ever transmitted anything besides the creaks of old houses and the occasional sneeze. Agnes leans toward you, whispering about her personal planchette board carved from cherry wood, stained with tea and candle smoke and covered in swirling script. It writes best after midnight, she says, as if the alphabet becomes more emotionally available past 11. You nod respectfully while buttering a suspiciously gray bread roll. Down the table, another guest reveals a pocket thermometer. 2. Detect cold spots, she says proudly. Last week, it dropped 4 degrees near my cousin's ghost. No one asks for details, because that's considered rude in ghost hunting etiquette. But several people begin rummaging in their bags to show off their own paranormal gadgets. One woman unwraps a bundle of cloth to reveal what looks like a child's toy kaleidoscope. "Spirit lens," she says, filters out the mortal spectrum. You peer through it and see mostly purple blotches and something that might be marmalade. She nods sagely. You take mental notes. 2 compasses, 1 broken, a dowsing rod made from silver spoons, a deck of tarot cards bound with red ribbon, something called a spectral harmonizer, which appears to be a music box with wires sticking out of it. The man with the driveway stones is now explaining that his crystals must be placed in a north-facing triangle overnight in order to charge. No one questions what they're being charged with, but everyone nods in reverent confusion. You glance down at your own tools, suddenly feeling underprepared. Your pendulum feels modest. Your mirror shard isn't even cracked. You didn't even think to bring a single piece of copper wire. Honestly, if a ghost did show up, you'd be lucky to record it in CURSIVE. Then Madame Liriope appears again. She never really enters a room so much as coalesces into it. This time, she's holding a spirit bell, a dainty silver object with a clapper that allegedly rings when a presence draws near. She places it on the table and instructs everyone to go quiet. The room stills. The fire crackles. You can hear someone's stomach growl and someone else humming through their nose. Then dash plink. A tiny chime. Everyone freezes. The bell is vibrating, faintly spinning slowly on its own. Is there a presence among us? Madame Liriope asks softly. The room leans forward, as if collectively holding its breath. The bell chimes again, then stops. Agnes gasps. The man with the monocle drops it into his soup. Liriop merely nods. They are near. Someone mutters, "Hope they like goose." Dessert arrives, carried in by a young maid, who clearly wants nothing to do with the dead or the eccentric. It's a custard with a texture somewhere between pudding and regret. No one touches it. Afterward, the guests disperse to their rooms or to the parlor, but a few linger to examine each other's tools more closely. A small group gathers in the library to compare the weight of their spirit trumpets. You pretend to know the difference between a medium resonance and a low veil tuning trumpet. No one questions you because, let's be honest, no one actually understands the terminology. Still, you're impressed. The sheer variety of tools on display, from legitimate-looking to downright absurd, shows how widespread and deeply believed this ghost hunting hobby had become by the late 1800s. From England to America, seances were all the rage. Mediums were celebrities, and spiritual paraphernalia a booming cottage industry. Historians still debate how much of it was sincere belief and how much was theatrical flair. But for you, sitting there surrounded by flickering candles and the faint hum of a possible spirit presence, it's less about belief and more about possibility. Maybe ghosts don't care what tools you use. Maybe they just appreciate the effort. You finally head back to your room, pockets full of borrowed quartz and pamphlets. The hall is quiet. Too quiet. You pause. Before your door. Behind you, faintly, the spirit bell chimes again, then nothing. The morning sun filters through threadbare curtains, casting long pale stripes across your blanket and an ominous shadow from the coat rack that, for one fleeting second, you mistake for a visitor from the beyond. You blink. No ghost, just your cloak, hanging innocently and trying not to look guilty. After a breakfast of lukewarm porridge, exactly 2 slices of toast, and something advertised as kidney tea, you and the other guests gather in the sitting room to begin the next critical ritual, setting up the seance table. Now it's important to understand that in the 19th century spiritualist community, the seance table wasn't just a table. It was a character in the show. The co-star, even a willing accomplice in the drama of the invisible, the innkeepers. Assistant and impressively silent, young man in wool trousers and eternal disappointment rolls in the designated Seance table from a storage closet with the reverence of someone presenting a crown jewel. It's round, three-legged, made of aged mahogany with a few old scorch marks and one suspicious gouge that looks a lot like teeth. The group surrounds it in respectful silence. You're instructed to help set the stage, which includes brushing the velvet cloth, adjusting the leg pegs to create a certain imbalance, and tapping it with your knuckles to test for responsive potential. You pretend to know what that means and knock 3 times. The table creaks in a vaguely approving way. Madame Liriope steps forward. Her newest robe, deep forest green, embroidered with vines, moons, and strangely, what might be a crab juggling stars. She explains the importance of selecting a table with the proper disposition. Historians still argue whether this meant anything technical, or if it simply referred to how dramatically the table could tilt without fully collapsing. She draws everyone's attention to a small stack of matching cushions. For proper alignment, she intones. Spirit communication is not merely energetic, it is ergonomic. You stifle a yawn and shift your knees. 1. Guest size and spiritual agreement. Then comes the balance ritual, where each guest takes a turn placing their fingertips on the table's surface, while Liriope gently nudges it in a circle. If the table wobbles just enough to feel alive, it's declared ready. If it's too stiff, it's given a brief talking to and a new spot on the rug. You're pretty sure someone mutters a prayer to a furniture deity. You get your turn. Fingers light on the worn wood, you feel something. Not a spirit necessarily, but definitely some movement, possibly wind, possibly Madame Liriope's elbow. But hey, who's measuring? There's a brief commotion when Mr. Pendlewick, the monocle soup man, insists on testing his table response amplifier, a metal cone he places under one leg. It emits a faint humming noise and promptly causes the table to tilt sharply into Mrs. Wilburton's lap. Liriope gives him a look usually reserved for headstrong toddlers and Victorian poets. The cone is removed. Next, the room's lighting must be adjusted. Heavy velvet curtains are drawn tight, leaving just a sliver of dusty daylight for ambience. A gas lamp is lowered. Candles are lit and strategically placed around the room to create shadowy depth without full darkness. You must give the spirits something to hide behind, Liriope says. You're pretty sure you heard that in a murder mystery once. And then chairs. Always 12, even if there are only 9 guests. The remaining seats are for the unseen. You help position them carefully, making sure the backs face inward. Someone suggests tying a ribbon to each spirit chair, so you can tell if a guest from beyond shifts it during the session. Liriope nods, somewhat condescendingly. The final flourish, placing small items at the table's center. These are focal objects, chosen for their symbolic or spiritual weight. A pocket watch that belonged to someone's grandfather. A strand of hair in a locket. A tiny bell. A child's shoe. You wonder briefly how that last one was packed, and then quickly decide not to ask. You offer your pendulum, placing it gently atop a folded cloth. Madame Liriope approves. One guest, clearly trying to outdo everyone else, reveals a sealed envelope that supposedly contains a spirit-written message from last year's seance at this very house. She won't reveal its contents until tonight's session, unless the ghosts do it for her. You file this under things to watch for with a healthy dose of side-eye. As you all take a step back to observe the completed setup, there's a moment of actual reverence. The room feels different. Heavier, somehow. Like it's listening. Or maybe it's just the smell of old wax and strong emotion. But still, the table gleams under the candlelight. Chairs stand ready, empty and expectant. Objects sit quietly in the center, waiting to be recognized. The room feels like a stage just before the curtain rises. Liriope clears her throat. Tonight, she says softly, we invite the dead to speak, but first we must let the house sleep. This, apparently, is a cue for everyone to leave the room and allow the energy to settle. You follow the others out, passing under the archway and feeling for just a second a strange little shiver up your spine. Maybe it's the chill of a draft, or maybe the table's not as empty as it looks. The house is quiet again. Not the kind of quiet you get in modern buildings, where the silence hums with electricity and Wi-Fi, but the kind of old silence that seems to have its own weight, thick, slow, and slightly judgmental. You tiptoe down the hallway, shoes muffled by worn rugs that seem to have absorbed 100 years of whispers and heavy secrets. A handbell chimes faintly in the parlor, signaling the next event on your increasingly peculiar weekend itinerary. Orientation lecture and paranormal itinerary overview. A mouthful, yes, but that's how you know it's serious. You find yourself back in the library. The curtains are drawn again, but this time they've let in just enough light to turn the dust into a shimmering mist. There's something very theatrical seance opera about it. A blackboard has been wheeled into the room complete with chalk. Drawings of circles, arrows, and what might be a ghost in a top hat. It's unclear whether the top hat is standard spirit attire or just someone's artistic flair. Madame Liriope stands beside it with a pointer stick. Her robe today is deep navy, embroidered with golden keys and crescent moons. A brooch shaped like a weeping angel adorns her chest. You half expect it to blink. She begins the orientation with a voice as soothing as molasses over silk. "We must understand the structure," she says, tapping the board gently. "Spirits respond best to discipline." You wonder if this means ghosts are just very strict schoolmasters with unfinished business and a need for better time management. She divides the weekend into 4 essential categories. 1. Communal alignment. That's code for group meditation and polite small talk. 2. Mirror gazing. Yes, you will be staring into an antique mirror hoping to spot a ghost instead of your own disappointed expression. 3. Nocturnal ectoplasmic experimentation, which, based on the side glance she gives Dr. Wilberforce, may involve far more enthusiasm than science. 4. The midnight walk. A candlelit stroll through the garden paths where at least 3 people will claim to have heard whispering that later turns out to be the gardener's cat. The group nods solemnly. Then Liriope begins passing out parchment schedules, handwritten in looping ink. Yours reads, Saturday evening itinerary 7 p.m. Dinner with spirit harmonics. Optional harp accompaniment, 8:15 p.m. Group seance preparation and cloak smudging ritual. 9 p.m. Seance proper 10:45 p.m. Post-seance journaling circle. And spirit snacks 12 a.m. Moonlit grounds walk 1 a.m. Return to chambers. Sleep lightly. You blink at the last line. Sleep lightly? Not exactly comforting when you're being encouraged to invite spirits into your personal space. Agnes, seated beside you again, leans in. Last year, someone saw a ghost dog in the rose garden, she whispers. You nod politely. Was it barking? No, she says, eyes wide. It was weeping. You write weeping ghost dog in the margins of your schedule. Just in case. The discussion turns to preparation. Each participant is expected to bring one object of personal psychic significance to the evening seance. You think of your pendulum, your notebook, the slightly melted candle stub you brought from home, just in case. Are any of these psychic enough? Probably not. You begin mentally assigning levels of ghostliness to your belongings, like some sort of spiritual Pokemon ranking system. Dr. Wilberforce raises a hand. Will there be time allotted for frequency tuning? I've brought a resonance fork set. Tune to D minor. Liriope responds, only if the spirits find it tolerable. Some are highly opinionated about minor keys. You suspect she's not joking. A woman near the fireplace asks if she may bring her dog to the seance. The dog is small, scruffy, and currently sleeping in a handbag. Liriope pauses, tilts her head, then shrugs. If the dog can behave, she says. But if it begins to channel, we stop immediately. You write down dog channeling equals session. Over. Good to know. Then someone mentions mirror gazing, which seems to terrify half the room. According to Liriope, participants will take turns staring into a large antique mirror under dim candlelight, in the hope that faces from beyond will appear. Historians still argue whether these experiences were true supernatural encounters, or simply the result of candle flicker, eye strain, and heavy Victorian diets. You're torn between dread and curiosity. What if you see something? What if you don't? Worse, what if you see your own reflection making faces behind your back? The final itinerary item, the midnight grounds walk, sounds pleasant until Liriope explains that you must carry your own candle. Walk in silence and follow the path without turning around. The spirits follow, she says, but they hate to be seen trailing behind. Cool, no pressure. The lecture concludes with a few key rules. No sudden movements during seances. Do not mock the spirits. Do not use lavender oil unless instructed due to past incidents. And absolutely no tickling experiments. Even for science, you jot down notes, trying to look as though you've always known that lavender was a dangerous psychic irritant. Agnes starts to ask a question, then pauses and says she just ask her spirit guide later. As the group disperses for tea, you tuck your schedule into your coat, mentally preparing for the hours ahead. Candlelit rituals, haunted mirrors, forbiddens, herbs, and a midnight stroll where you're not allowed to turn around. You're not entirely sure if this is a paranormal retreat or just an elaborate Victorian improv club. But hey, at least there are snacks. You're sipping a lukewarm cup of something called spirit-calming tea, which tastes mostly like regret and faint fennel when he appears. The man with too many crystals. You notice him before he says a word, because he clinks when he walks. Every step is accompanied by the gentle rattle of polished stones knocking against one another like a mobile rock slide. His name, apparently, is Ellis. He introduces himself in the third person, which already tells you more than you needed to. No, Ellis brings harmony, he says, gesturing to the array of crystals looped around his neck, wrists, and somehow ankles. Ellis channels only the highest vibrations. He sits across from you at the tea table, a fringe of glowing aura spray misting around him like an overly perfumed cloud. You suppress a sneeze. Agnes beside you again. She appears like a haunted penny, leans in and whispers, "He brought 47 crystals." I counted. You look at him more closely. The man is practically a walking geology museum. Around his neck hangs a large rose quartz that keeps knocking into his teacup. On each finger, a ring set with something shiny, amethyst, tiger's eye. Citron, possibly a skittle. Tucked into his belt are pouch after pouch, all bulging with stones of questionable provenance. I find that spirits respond better to properly triangulated energies. Ellis says, laying out 3 stones in a precise triangle on the table between you. Clear quartz for amplification, hematite for grounding, and lapis lazuli for celestial alignment. You nod slowly, as if you two have frequent conversations with celestial alignments. Do you use crystals? He asks, eyeing you like a disappointed teacher evaluating a toddler's art project. I dabble, you say, which is both vague and non-committal enough to dodge further interrogation. He pulls out a small booklet handwritten, naturally titled Crystal Configurations for the Other Side. You glance at the first page. There's a hand-drawn diagram of a seance table with arrows, symbols, and one note that simply says, "No obsidian after sunset." No explanation, just don't. Historians still argue whether such elaborate systems had any basis in authentic practice, or whether they were invented wholesale by people who wanted their seances to feel more like treasure maps. Ellis shows you his master grid. It's a cloth printed with a 6-pointed star, each corner labeled with an emotion: grief, longing, curiosity, loyalty, shame, and miscellaneous. He begins placing crystals into each section with delicate reverence, Some spirits respond only to green aventurine, he murmurs. Particularly Civil War widows. Garnet is good for stubborn ghosts. Fluorite helps spirits articulate better. What about ghosts who just want to complain? You ask. He nods gravely. Smoky quartz. A woman at a nearby table peeks over. Did you bring moldavite? Ellis raises one eyebrow. I don't travel with moldavite. There's an audible gasp from 3 people and 1 teacup. You're not sure whether that's because moldavite is too powerful or too expensive. Either way, Ellis has the room's full attention now. He launches into a story, his awakening, which apparently involved an unfortunate incident with a mirror, a summer storm, and an angry ghost who didn't appreciate being summoned during a thunderclap. The crystals protected me, he says, adjusting his necklace so it glints more impressively in the candlelight. That, and the emergency lavender satchel. You blink. Wait, I thought lavender was banned. He holds up both hands, palms out. Only if improperly activated. Mine was neutralized. Of course it was. The conversation turns to crystal placement strategies for the upcoming seance. Ellis insists on creating a perimeter grid, which will take approximately 26 stones and possibly an extension cord. Madame Liriope, overhearing this, smiles faintly and says, as long as no one trips over your enlightenment, I see no harm. You volunteer, somewhat recklessly, to help him set up his grid. Within minutes, you're crawling on the floor of the seance room, placing stones at precise distances according to Ellis's hand-drawn chart. He explains that each crystal must be attuned to the room. By briefly whispering your name to it, you stare at a small chunk of red jasper. Hi, you say. Ellis nods. Good, now try humming. Spirits prefer a flat. You hum something vaguely tuneful. The crystal does not respond, but Ellis seems pleased. You're a natural, he says. As the perimeter takes shape, the other guests begin drifting in, eyeing the growing formation on the floor with a mix of awe and mild terror. Agnes clutches her planchette tightly. Dr. Wilberforce mutters something about pseudoscientific nonsense, but still walks carefully around the grid. One guest, an older woman wearing a shawl that might be made of taxidermied bats, asks if crystals are safe to touch. Ellis straightens. Only if you're spiritually hydrated. She retracts her hand. At last, the grid is complete. Ellis stands in the center, arms lifted. It is done, he intones. We have built a gate of clarity. You step back, brushing crystal dust from your hands. There's something oddly calming about the whole process. Maybe it's the repetition. Maybe it's the scent of sandalwood and overconfidence. Maybe you're just starting to believe in the power of placebo geology. Either way, the seance is one step closer. And Ellis? He's now rummaging through a side pouch for his emergency obsidian. You don't ask. You've barely recovered from your impromptu apprenticeship in crystal alignment when the smell hits you, a curious blend of dill, rosewater, and slightly burned toast. You follow your nose to the dining room, where the buffet table has been transformed into what Madame Liriope refers to, with great solemnity, as the refreshments spread for both planes. It's a delicate art, she explains. Feeding the living is straightforward. Feeding the dead, however, requires symbolism, subtlety, and a willingness to suspend culinary judgment. You find yourself staring at a lace-covered table upon which rests a bizarre mix of offerings. On one tiered plate, salted almonds, candied violets, and a tiny loaf of something labeled spirit bread. On another, figs, sugar cubes, and an ornate dish containing precisely 13 raisins. Not a raisin more. Not a raisin less. These, Madame Liriope announces, waving a gloved hand over the raisins, are for the departed. Do they eat them? Someone asks. She offers a faint smile. Not with mouths. Agnes nods like that makes perfect sense. They absorb the essence. Ah, you say, chewing thoughtfully on a cucumber sandwich that tastes like disappointment. and ghost stories. You're not sure what the spirits absorb from that, but it's probably mild confusion. There's also a large glass punch bowl filled with moon water, steeped in herbs, lavender, mint, and a few floating petals of something. Pale and definitely not FDA approved. You take a ladleful, sip cautiously, and discover it tastes like chilled garden with a hint of pencil shaving. Beside the punch bowl is a smaller cup labeled for them only. It contains no liquid, just mist. No one's entirely sure how, but every time you glance at it, the vapor seems to shift. That's new, Agnes whispers. Last year it was dry toast. At the far end of the table is a selection of more earthly snacks: seed cake, butter biscuits, ginger wafers, and 3 kinds of tea, one of which is mysteriously labeled for calming third eyes. Dr. Wilberforce is spooning marmalade onto his biscuit like it owes him money. The man with too many crystals gently sets a piece of crystal-shaped hard candy onto the spirit plate and bows slightly. And then there's the centerpiece. It's a covered silver platter that Liriope dramatically unveils to reveal nothing. Just a perfectly polished silver surface. This, she says reverently, is the offering space. Leave a token if you wish. Something from the heart. One by one, guests approach and place items. A single daisy, a tiny bell, a child's marble, a handwritten note folded many times over. You hesitate, then reach into your pocket and place your lucky coin, the one you've carried for years. Worn smooth from anxious rubbing, it lands with a soft ting. Somehow the platter feels more full. Liriope leans close and whispers, "The dead remember generosity." You nod, trying not to think about how much that coin meant to you, and how you're now spiritually indebted to someone who may have died in the Crimean War. Suddenly, the dog in the handbag lets out a tiny yip. Everyone freezes. The dog blinks, licks its paw, goes back to sleep. Liriope raises an eyebrow. Spirits come and go. You're not sure if she means the actual spirits or just the dog's lunch. Around the room, guests begin discussing their own experiences with spirit food. Agnes once tried to serve raspberry jam to her deceased aunt and swears the jar exploded. The monocle man claims ghosts hate strong cheese. A young woman in a burgundy corset confesses she once tempted a ghost with lemon drops and ended up haunted for a month by the smell of citrus. Historians still argue whether any of this constitutes a legitimate system of supernatural nutrition, or if it's just an elaborate excuse for Victorians to set dramatic tea tables. But the earnestness is real. The rituals, however strange, provide comfort, connection, a sense that something invisible might be reaching back. Even if all it does is nudge a spoon or ripple a napkin, it's something. Ellis, of course, begins arranging his own plate for the spirits with 3 slices of apple, one for each realm. A sprig of sage and a crystal-infused honey drizzle he swears aids in ghost digestion. You're 98% sure that's made up, but no one questions him. Agnes places a peppermint on the tray. My grandfather always liked them, just in case he shows up. You find yourself wishing, oddly, that someone from your past would make an appearance too, even if only to eat a ghost raisin. Finally, Liriope lifts her glass of moon water and makes a soft toast. To the ones who wait, may they find us when they wish. May they pass by if they prefer. Everyone raises their glasses, real and imaginary, and sips. There's no thunderclap, no spectral hand reaching out for the biscuits. Just a moment of silence, warm and thick, like breath held at the edge of sleep. You leave the room with the faintest taste of fennel and mystery lingering on your tongue, and the odd sensation that someone, somewhere, is feeling a little less forgotten. The mirror is older than the house. At least, that's what Madame Liriope claims as she pulls back the embroidered curtain, revealing it in the drawing room, a tall, imposing slab of silvered glass framed in walnut, carved with vines, birds, and the occasional cherub who seems just a little too smug. She places one gloved hand on its edge, This is not just any mirror. It is a liminal object, a surface that reflects not only light, but longing. A pause, also shadows. You stand at the edge of the circle forming around the mirror, notebook clutched to your chest, stomach, fluttering in a way that has nothing to do with the spirit bread and everything to do with the idea of staring at your own face long enough for it to stop being familiar. Mirror gazing, Liriope says, is one of the oldest spirit-inviting rituals. Ancient Egyptians practiced it with polished obsidian, the Greeks with pools of still water, Victorians. She gestures grandly. We use haunted furniture. Agnes gasps audibly. She's already clutching her planchette like it's a stress ball. Ellis, naturally, is whispering to his reflection and adjusting a clear quartz against his temple. Liriope dims the gaslights, one by one. Then she lights a trio of beeswax candles, their flickering glow now the only illumination in the room. Shadows swell like rising dough. The mirror takes on that strange depth old glass develops, where the reflection seems to float several inches behind the surface, as if waiting for the right moment to lean out. Each of you, she says, will take a turn. Sit, do not speak, do not look away, and most importantly, do not try to fix your hair. Her eyes lock on Agnes. The first guest approaches, a soft-spoken man in tweed who confesses that he once dreamed of his grandmother's attic for 7 nights in a row. He sits before the mirror, breathes, looks. We all watch him not move. A minute passes. 2. The air grows heavier. Then his breath catches. I saw someone else behind me, he whispers after his turn. But when I turned, nothing. Classic, murmurs someone. Next comes the woman in the burgundy corset. She stares for a long time. Then, without warning, laughs softly and murmurs, my reflection winked at me. Everyone claps politely, as though this were a well-executed magic trick. When it's your turn, you approach slowly, heart thumping. The seat creaks as you settle in. Candlelight warps the room. Your own face stares back, tired, slightly skeptical, and vaguely regretting the dried lavender tea from earlier. You breathe. And watch, your eyes reflected are darker than usual. The shadows in the corners seem to move just slightly. Nothing obvious, but your reflection doesn't feel entirely obedient. Like if you blinked, it might not blink back. You lean closer. A draft brushes your cheek. Was that a sigh? No, just the house. Probably. After what feels like a small eternity, Madame Liriope gently taps your shoulder. You rise and return to your seat, trying not to trip on Ellis's ankle crystals, which have migrated onto the rug. What did you see? Agnes hisses. Honestly, you whisper. I'm not sure it was me looking back. Agnes nods solemnly, clearly thrilled. She begins scribbling in her seance journal. You catch a glimpse. She's drawn your face and added a note that says possible host body. As the others take their turns, the mirror seems to darken, not physically but emotionally. Its surface grows moodier, less reflective. It holds on to the images longer, like it's trying to keep something. One guest insists he saw a woman in a wedding dress behind him. Another swears he aged 20 years in his own reflection. Historians still argue whether these experiences were true contact with the beyond, or just Victorian minds responding to low-light, suggestive language, and an overactive imagination brought on by corsets and dried rose petals. But the atmosphere is undeniable. You're all sitting in a room, watching each other peer into a piece of glass, and yet it feels like something is watching you from the other side. From the inside. Ellis offers to cleanse the mirror afterward with a small bundle of crystals and a slice of lemon. Madame Liriope stops him with a single raised eyebrow. Some things, she says, should be left smudged. As the final participant takes their seat, the dog in the handbag wakes up, whines once, and then falls asleep again. It's widely regarded as an endorsement. Once the ritual is over, Liriope replaces the curtain and tells everyone to let the reflections fade on their own. You leave the room in silence, the afterimage of your own eyes still burning faintly in your mind. In the hallway mirror, you glance sideways. This time, the reflection blinks with you. Maybe. There's a certain hush that falls over a house before a seance. It isn't silence, exactly. It's more like a deliberate pause, like the building itself is holding its breath, waiting to see whether you're brave or foolish enough to keep going. You're in your room, now cloaked in dim golden lamplight, preparing for the main event. The seance proper, as Madame Liriope called it during orientation, capital P, capital S. Your clothes are freshly brushed. Your lucky socks are on. You've tucked your notebook, pendulum, and a slightly squashed raisin, don't ask, into your coat pocket. And you're nervously eyeing the bundle of herbs you were issued. Check-in, smudging bundle, the note said. Do not light until instructed. Do not wave aggressively. Do not inhale directly. You really hope that third instruction came. From personal experience, the hallway creaks with quiet footsteps as other guests begin to emerge, looking various shades of spooked, solemn, or overly perfumed. Ellis, of course, smells like sandalwood and ambition. Agnes has fastened her hair with what looks like an antique key. You're not sure if it's symbolic or just on theme. You follow the procession to the seance room, which now glows and warm. Candlelight. 12 chairs encircle the great table, their spindly legs casting long shadows across the floor. The perimeter crystal grid still gleams faintly underfoot. Someone's placed a fresh bowl of moon water in the center, beside the spirit bell, the offering tray, and somehow a single red carnation that wasn't there before. Nobody knows who placed it. Nobody wants to ask. Liriope floats in a moment later, dressed in midnight velvet this time, with silver-threaded stars across her shoulders and sleeves that could double as curtains. She doesn't speak. She simply nods once, dramatically, and moves to her chair. Everyone takes their seat. A hush falls, the air shifts. Hands upon the table. Liriope says softly, you obey, placing your fingertips lightly against the wood. The surface feels warm. Or maybe you're just projecting. Breathe in, she says, and you do. Breathe out. A pause. Do not break the circle. She closes her eyes. The room seems to do the same. To those who linger in the unseen places, she intones. To those whose names are forgotten, or whispered only at dusk, to those who seek and those who wait, we welcome you. A long pause, then the first knock. It's soft, barely audible, but it comes from beneath the table. Several guests flinch. The dog in the handbag lets out a single whimper and then burrows deeper into a velvet wrap. Liriope doesn't open her eyes. If there is one among you who would speak, she says, let them move the bell. Silence. Then, plink. The spirit bell rings, soft and clear. You don't move. You don't breathe. You just listen. Do you have a name? Liriope asks gently. You may spell it. This is where things get interpretive. She begins calling out letters of the alphabet, pausing between each. When the bell rings after a certain letter, that's marked down. It's like playing Ghost Scrabble, but with significantly higher stakes and no triple word scores. D. Silence. E. Silence. F. Plink. A murmur runs through the room. G. Silence. Plink. Fhid scribbles notes like she's in a police drama. Ellis holds a crystal up to his third eye. The mirror in the corner seems to darken ever so slightly. Are you F.A.? Liriope asks. The bell stays still. Do you want to speak with someone here? A pause. Plink. Now everyone's leaning forward, but no one breaks the circle. Except Wilberforce, who sneezes once and immediately apologizes to both the spirits and the table. The bell rings again. Faster this time. And then the table moves, just a little. Just enough for the legs to creak, for the center bowl of water to ripple. You feel it, not just hear it, but feel it, like a tug under your fingertips. Like someone's exhaling through the wood. Liriope opens her eyes. They're here. Everyone's quiet, not the scared kind of quiet. The waiting kind. I will act as vessel, she says. Do not break the circle. And then she goes still. Breathing changes, slower, shallower. Her eyes close again, her chin drops to her chest. For a second, she's just a woman in a big robe, pretending to nap dramatically. Then she speaks. And it is not her voice. It's low, gravelly, British, maybe. Possibly annoyed. Why are you in my room? That's what the voice says. Several people jump. One woman gasps and nearly tips her chair. Liriope's head lifts slightly. This is my home. This is my table. The voice continues, unbothered. Are you the one who left the fig? Agnes nods as if that somehow helps. It was dry. The voice says, you're now fighting the urge to apologize on her behalf. What is your name? Someone asks. The voice hesitates. Harold, it says. Used to be. Not sure anymore. You. Scribble this down next to FH and add a note. Possible Harold? Dry fig critic? Then the voice chuckles just once, low, rusted. You think you're talking to the dead, it says. You are not. You're talking to the in-between. That gets everyone's attention. What is the in-between? Ellis asks because of. Course he does. The voice doesn't answer. Instead, the spirit bell shatters. Not violently, not dramatically. Just gives way. A tiny crack, a splintering edge, and then a clink of silver pieces falling inward. Like a sigh that gave up, Liriope jerks back. Her eyes flutter open. Her voice is hers again. Circle broken, she says weakly. Spirit's gone. Everyone leans back, blinking, breathing again. The tension drops from the ceiling like dust. That, she whispers, was a visitor. She doesn't say friendly or unfriendly, just a visitor. And just like that, the seance is over. There's a strange kind of noise that happens after a seance. Not the clatter of chairs or the rustle of robes, but the collective exhale of people who've just pretended they didn't believe anything too much, only to suddenly be very convinced. You sit there for a moment, fingertips still tingling faintly from the table's subtle motion. Around you, guests speak in hushed, fragmented phrases. Did you feel that? It said Harold, didn't it? That bell didn't just fall apart. It resigned. I told you figs were polarizing. Madame Liriope remains seated, pale but composed, sipping delicately from a cup of what appears to be rosehip tea. Her fingers tremble only slightly. You wonder how much of her exhaustion is spiritual channeling, and how much is theatrical. Timing. Ellis, naturally, is already reconstructing the crystal grid. The perimeter fractured, he says grimly. The energy disrupted the symmetry. You peer at the broken bell, now resting in its velvet-lined box like a fallen hero. Dr. Wilberforce is inspecting it with the intensity of a man who once tried to patent ghost repellent. Metal fatigue, he mutters. Coincidence? Or poltergeist-induced resonance shatter? Historians still argue whether physical effects during seances, bells ringing, tables tilting, mirrors fogging, were the work of spirits or cleverly concealed wires, springs, or theatrical assistants with excellent crouching skills. But tonight, no one mentions trickery. It would feel rude. The group shifts gradually into the journaling phase. Guests retreat to corners of the room or wander out toward quieter parlors, clutching notebooks and fountain pens like war poets after the first cannonball. You sit beside the fireplace, the heat still low but comforting, and flip to a clean page. You begin writing. Harold? Used to be. In between. Knew about the fig. Not hostile, just tired. Across from you, Agnes is sketching the broken bell from memory. She's added tiny ghost hands holding spoons in the background for artistic flair. That wasn't just residual energy, she says quietly. That was someone. Ellis crouches nearby, arranging a triangle of black tourmaline around his tea saucer. Something bypassed the crystal barrier. I felt it, a ripple. You nod, not entirely sure what that means, but unwilling to dispute it. Across the room, a guest announces that they've decided to rename their cat Harold in honor of the seance. No one disagrees. Then, from a low cabinet in the corner of the room, Liriope withdraws a box. It's lacquered wood, maybe Japanese, maybe something else entirely. She opens it reverently, revealing the post-seance spirit tools, a series of objects meant to help participants calm the veil and reground themselves in the world of the living. You're handed a folded cloth pouch. Inside, you find a dried orange slice tied with blue string, a stick of cinnamon, a black stone carved with a spiral, a tiny vial of salt water, and a note that simply says, "Drink something warm, you're still porous." You look up. Is this spirit first aid? Liriope gives the smallest of nods. Even borrowed doors can leave splinters. You decide not to question the metaphor. You're not sure you want to know what kind of door you just walked through, or what might still be stuck to your spiritual coat. You excuse yourself to the hallway for a few minutes of stillness. The candlelight dances across the wallpaper in soft waves, and your reflection in the mirror, just a regular mirror this time, thank goodness, seems calm again. Human again, sort of. There's a soft rustle to your left. You glance over. It's the dog, standing on the carpet, no longer in its handbag, staring at the closed seance room door. Just staring. Then it sits down, tilts its head, then goes back to sleep. That feels like a good omen. You return to the parlor where someone's begun passing around cups of warm milk with nutmeg. Others have swapped tea for wine, or boldly a little brandy. You accept your mug with gratitude. The warmth seeps into your fingers, and then deeper, into the strange, unsteady part of you that still half expects a disembodied voice to complain about dessert. As the guests sip and chat, stories begin to flow, not just about this seance, but others. The woman with the shawl of bat wings once saw a spirit appear in her window on a rainy night. Wilberforce recalls a time in Oxford when a chair spun across the room without assistance. Agnes insists her spirit guide once warned her not to get bangs. He was right, she adds mournfully. You listen, quietly amazed at how easy it is for everyone to believe tonight. Not because of proof, not because of shock, but because of the shared experience. The subtle sense of maybe, because something rang that bell. Something moved that table, and no one, not even Wilberforce, is claiming otherwise. As the group slowly begins to rise, stretching limbs, shaking off the seance hush, you hear Liriope murmur one last phrase as she collects the broken bell. They don't all speak, but they all listen. You don't write that one down. You're not sure you need to. By the time you make your way outside, the house seems to have exhaled. Whatever tension built up during the seance has now slipped between the cracks in the walls and into the soil, leaving behind a kind of sleepy stillness. Candles flicker from windows, but their glow feels less watchful now, less expectant. It's officially time for the midnight walk. According to the schedule, carefully written in lupin ink and slightly scented with cloves, you are to proceed along the garden path by candlelight. No speaking. No turning back. No modern torches, phones, or cheeky little lantern apps. As Liriope had warned earlier with a perfectly arched eyebrow, each guest is issued a long white candle, already lit. Yours drips slowly onto the brass saucer below it, wax tracing strange runes as it pools. You're handed a second item, a tiny silver bell attached to a black ribbon. It's for emergencies, you're told, though no one explains what qualifies as an emergency. You decide if your own reflection suddenly taps on the outside of the mirror again. You'll consider that bell-worthy. Liriope stands by the garden gate, staff in hand, cloaked in a shawl that seems to change color depending on the light. "This is not a chase," she says quietly. "You're not hunting spirits. You're inviting them to walk beside you. Don't try to see them. Just notice what they leave behind." And with that, the gate opens. The gravel crunches softly beneath your feet. The night is damp, and the scent of wet earth, old roses, and wood smoke clings to everything. Trees rustle in a wind that never seems to touch your skin. Your candle glows gently, illuminating only a few feet ahead. You are, for all intents and purposes, walking into the unknown with a bit of wax in the prayer. You glance to your left, Agnes, eyes wide, jaw clenched, holding her candle like it's a lightsaber. Behind her, Ellis trails slightly, muttering. To his obsidian. The dog has stayed behind, clearly preferring ghosts that don't require exercise. The garden path winds in lazy loops, bordered by hedges that look like they've been groomed by someone with a slight vendetta. Statues of angels and urns dot the way, casting warped shadows across the grass. At one point, you pass a sundial that seems to be ticking. It's well past midnight. Do not turn around. You remember Liriope's words. The spirits follow, but they hate to be watched. You try to keep your candle steady. Focus forward. And then, as if on cue, you feel it. Not footsteps, not breath, just presence. A kind of gentle awareness pressing against your back, like a question that hasn't yet been asked. The hair on your arms rises, and your mind races. To fill in the blanks, is it Harold? Is it the woman in the mirror? Is it just your imagination taking a scenic stroll? You keep walking. The group stretches out now, each person lost in their own flickering corridor of light and shadow. One woman stops by a small tree and whispers something. She seems to receive a reply only she can hear. Wilberforce is holding a thermometer and scribbling notes by the hedge. Agnes has veered slightly into a flower bed. The path curves left then. Right, then dips into a shallow dell lined with old stones. You feel drawn to one in particular, shorter than the others, moss-covered, its engraving too weathered to read. You pause for a breath. Just one dot, and then something brushes your coat. It's so faint you almost miss it. Like a breeze, but inward. You turn your head slightly, but not too far, and whisper, "Hello." Nothing answers, but something listens. Moon, hidden all evening behind clouds, briefly reveals itself. It casts a sheen over the grass, silvers the path ahead. For a moment, you can see all the footprints, fresh ones, yours and the others, but also others, smaller, bare, headed the opposite way. You blink. They vanish. You walk on. By the time you reach the arbor, a tangle of vines and wrought iron at the far edge of the grounds, you're almost at the end of the route. The gate beyond marks the return. But Liriope had said clearly, the spirits walk only one way. If you turn around, if you try to see what followed, you risk breaking the thread. So you pass through the arbor and into the clearing beyond. There's a small bench here, damp with dew. A brazier has been lit, sending faint smoke into the air. That smells of sage and clove. You sit, not just because you're tired, but because the silence invites it. The candle flickers gently in your hand, its wax now dripping steadily onto your sleeve. You don't mind. Someone else arrives, Agnes, slightly breathless. She sits beside you without a word. You both watch the path, not turning, just waiting. And gradually, the others appear, one by one. All of them quiet. All of them somehow changed, eyes softer, shoulders looser. A little less here, and a little more elsewhere. Ellis's quartz glows faintly in the moonlight. Wilberforce has stopped taking notes. Even the woman with the bat shawl is weeping gently, not fearfully, but like someone who's been found. Eventually Liriope appears. No gate creaks, no footfall sounds. She's just there. Standing by the brazier. She nods once. The walk is complete. She doesn't ask what we saw, or felt, or heard. She doesn't need to. The ritual wasn't about the ghosts. It was about making space for them. And somehow, without turning back, you understand that. Back inside, the warmth of the house hits you like a memory. Your coat is damp at the hem. The candle has finally burned low enough to extinguish itself with a faint hiss. All around you, guests return in silence, brushing past one another like ships in fog, faces pale and reflective, as if they've just come back from a long journey where no words were needed. In the front parlor, Lirapi has set out warm cloths and soft slippers. You change into yours, not questioning the fact that they fit perfectly. Agnes emerges from the side hall holding a tray of steaming mug cinnamon milk. She says, "Ghost approved." You sink into a chair by the fire and sip carefully. The world begins to return brick by brick, breath by breath. And yet, you're still straddling two shores. You can feel it in your fingertips, in your lungs, in the way your thoughts seem to echo just a second too long. Ellis, naturally, has resumed crystal duty. He's lining up his moon-charged obsidians along the windowsill to balance the influx of residual shadow. You don't ask for clarification. Wilberforce has retreated into the corner with a thick volume, titled Taphonomy of the Restless. Every now and then, he underlines something with a gold mechanical pencil and mutters fascinating to himself. Madame Lirapi enters wearing a different robe. This one is a rich burgundy trimmed in bronze thread, with a pattern of keys and hourglasses stitched along the hem. It billows around her as she glides toward the fireplace. Her hands carry a flat wooden box. She sets it gently on the low table and opens it to reveal a set of 12 ornate envelopes. Each is sealed with wax and stamped with the symbol you saw on the invitation, an eye framed by the crescent of a waning moon. "These," she says softly, "are parting tokens, one for each of you. Do not open them until you have returned to your private space. Some are messages, some are maps, some are reminders." One by one, guests step forward to claim their envelope. No one speaks, no one jokes. You wait your turn. When you finally reach the box, she holds out the last one. It feels warm in your hand, as though recently handled. The wax is indigo blue, the stamp pressed slightly off-center. You resist the urge to peek. "The next part," Lirapi says, "is for those who cannot leave things alone." Heads turn. "Those of you still curious," she adds, "may join me for a final ritual, a safer one, less porous." She leads you into the map room. Yes, the house has a map room. It's filled wall to wall with ancient atlases, star charts, floor plans, and delicate diagrams of ley lines, both earthly and imagined. The air smells of old paper and beeswax polish. In the center is a circular table, upon which rests a cloth marked with the 4 cardinal directions and a ring of arcane symbols that might be Sanskrit or extremely confident doodling. Lirapi unrolls a long parchment and lays it across the table. "This," she says, "is the psychographic trail. The map shows your path from the night walk, but not geographically, it's emotional. A swirling line that tracks not steps but sensation marked, with strange annotations like regret ripple and possible widow's glance. At one point, your path intersects with someone else's, perhaps Agnes, and the note beside it reads, 'Shared memory, shoe misplacement, 1863. Lirapi produces a pendulum from her robe. It's not one of those mass-produced things. This one looks handmade, carved from bone or ivory, with tiny runes etched along the sides. "We can follow what lingered," she says. "If you'd like." Ellis immediately leans forward. "Do we each get a turn?" "Only those who walked with silence." You nod. You remember your breathless steps, your refusal to glance over your shoulder. You remember the footprints in the moonlight. Lirapi begins. She suspends the pendulum above the parchment, and it begins to swing slow at first, then faster. Its path circles around a point labeled Stillness beneath ash tree. She stops it there and whispers, "Who lingers?" The room goes still. And then, from the far corner, the brass wind chime still from earlier in the evening lets out a soft, clear ring. No one touched it. Agnes inhales sharply. It followed, she murmurs. Liriope nods once. Some spirits walk backward through time. They visit where they were once remembered, or where they want to be. Historians still argue whether these seances actually summoned the dead, or simply coaxed out memories so vivid they took on lives of their own. Some say the seances were psychological echo chambers, others insist they were doorways. But right now, in this room, the distinction feels irrelevant. Liriope gently folds the map. They came close, she says. That's all they ever do. And that's enough. You all nod, silently agreeing without understanding exactly what you're agreeing to. Then she extinguishes the last candle, and you're left in soft shadow, hearts full of questions, but minds somehow quieter. You return to your room with your envelope tucked under your arm. You don't open it. Not yet. There's a strange comfort in not knowing. You lie in bed now, fully clothed except for your shoes, which sit neatly by the hearth like obedient ghosts of your former skepticism. The room is dim, the gaslight lowered to a faint glow. Outside, the wind whistles softly through the gables. Somewhere downstairs, a floorboard creaks, not ominously, but with the sleepy sigh of old timber settling down for the night. Your envelope rests on the bedside table. You've been staring at it for a while now, as if the wax seal might blink. First. Agnes had opened hers immediately. You heard her whispering through the wall. Something about a feather and a date from 1872. Ellis, naturally, had declared his to be encrypted. He'd gone off to consult his crystal atlas. You, however, wait. Instead, you take stock of the room, the worn rug with the moth-nibbled corner, the painting above the mantel that may or may not depict someone who once died in this bed, the thick velvet curtains drawn tight against the moonlight. A fire burns low in the grate, its embers glowing like watchful eyes that are just too tired to stare for long. You stretch beneath the heavy quilt, your body buzzing with that peculiar exhaustion that comes from thinking too hard about things you can't explain. The kind of tired you feel after a funeral you didn't expect to be emotional about, or a conversation that pulled more truth from you than you meant to give. The envelope still waits. Eventually, you give in. You break the seal carefully, fingers trembling not from fear but anticipation. The flap opens with a soft snap, like a held breath finally released. Inside is a single card. Cream-colored, thick, embossed with faint lines you only see when the firelight hits it. Just right. It reads, "You were not alone. You walked without looking back. They noticed. You are remembered. Sleep well." That's it. No name. No explanation. Just that. You turn the card over. There's a pressed leaf there, fern, or maybe some old rose petal, and something written in what looks like silver ink, almost too faded to read. You hold it to the light, and the words shimmer into legibility. Whose name did you forget? Your heart lurches not in fear, but recognition. A face flashes in your mind, a brief image of someone you hadn't thought about in years, someone long gone, someone who, just maybe, had walked beside you in the garden. It's comforting. You place the card back inside the envelope, fold it shut again, and tuck it under your pillow. Not to hide it, but to keep it close. You don't feel alone anymore. And it's not because of the people still roaming the creaky corridors or the dog curled up somewhere beneath a velvet shawl. It's because in some quiet way, something else noticed you tonight. The clock chimes once an echo of midnight, or maybe something stranger. Time seems to soften here. You close your eyes, you drift, and then a knock. It's faint. Not on the door, but beneath the floorboards. You freeze. It comes again. Not loud, not threatening, just present. You sit up slightly. The fire flickers in response. "Hello?" You whisper. Nothing answers. The knock does not repeat. You wait, listening, holding your breath for longer than you probably should. But nothing stirs. You lie back down, heart slowly easing. Maybe it was the house. Maybe it was Agnes and her antique key. Maybe it was something else. But you're not afraid. Not now. Instead, you feel a kind of tethering. Like the world has shifted, and you've been gently hooked to some deeper current of time. Of memory. Of something that doesn't care whether you believe or not. Sleep starts to pull you under. And just as your mind begins to blur, a final thought surfaces, soft, uninvited, and entirely welcome. They notice. And that, somehow, is enough. Morning arrives reluctantly. You wake to the soft, muffled sounds of the house creaking itself into daylight. Somewhere far off, a kettle whistles. Footsteps pass your door, slow and slippered. Someone coughs politely into a handkerchief. There's a distinct lack of the usual clatter that accompanies people trying to look busy before coffee here. Everything moves like it just came out of a fog. You sit up slowly, the quilt sliding off your shoulder like an old friend. Your envelope is still tucked under your pillow. You reach for it, half expecting it to have changed in the night, but it's the same creased, faintly warm, still holding the quiet weight of whatever message had been tucked inside. When you cross to the mirror, your reflection is mercifully ordinary, hair slightly wild, shadows under the eyes. A small smudge of wax on your collar. Nothing whispers. Nothing winks. You exhale. Downstairs, the dining room is set for breakfast. Not a buffet this time, more of a communal spread. Mismatched china. A chipped porcelain teapot that still manages to pour perfectly. Slices of toast stacked high under a lace doily. Poached eggs, warm preserves, and a bowl of something you suspect is porridge. But only if you're willing to believe it's edible. Agnes is already there, wrapped in a paisley shawl, staring into her teacup like it holds a secret. I had a dream, she says without looking up. You sit beside her. Was it one of the regular kind? She shakes her head slowly. It was my grandmother, but younger, and she said thank you for remembering her birthday. You glance at her, puzzled. Did you? She frowns. I didn't. That's the thing. I didn't remember it. Not until I woke up. You both sit in silence, the clink of cutlery and the murmur of other guests weaving around you like morning mist. Ellis enters moments later, looking far too fresh. He's already wrapped his envelope in twine and stuffed it into a pouch labeled post-experiential artifacts. He pours himself a cup of something herbal and mutters, "Spirit maps hold residual empathy longer than anticipated." You just nod. It's too early for translation. Wilberforce has dark circles under his eyes and is clutching a newspaper with a date from last week. My envelope was blank, he says, halfway to himself. But it smelled like the sea. He takes a sip of coffee, then adds, I haven't been to the sea since I was 8. Everyone seems just a little displaced. Not in a bad way, just not entirely here. Madame Liriapi enters last. She's wearing a tailored day dress today, no velvet, no shawls, just crisp linen and a brooch in the shape of an hourglass turned sideways. She offers a small smile, then sits at the head of the table. I trust you slept as well as could be expected. Murmurs of agreement ripple through the group. Someone mumbles something about unusually vivid dreams. Someone else mentions the mirror blinking again. Everyone chuckles. No one asks if it's a joke. I'm told, Liriapi says gently, that this place can linger. Some guests feel its effects for days, others for years. That's all right. It only means you were paying attention. She sips her tea. Today is for returning, she adds, but not quite yet. She gestures toward a sideboard where a large wooden chest now rests. It's covered in small drawers, each labeled in cursive script. Skeptic's recalibration, post-spirit palate cleanse, herbs for the lingering sensation of being watched. You open the one labeled, for quiet minds. Inside are several paper-wrapped bundles. You take one. It smells like dried lavender and the inside of a very old book. There's also a note that reads, "Steep for 10 minutes, drink warm. Do not attempt algebra afterward." Ellis takes the one labeled residual vibration tea. Agnes picks tearful, grateful, or confused. The rest of the morning passes gently. Some guests go walking in the garden again, this time in sunlight. Others write in journals, their pens whispering secrets into pages they'll probably never read aloud. A few of you wander into the library, where the dog sleeps on the hearth, its tiny chest rising and falling in rhythm with the clock. Historians still argue whether the so-called post-seance states were genuinely paranormal or simply the emotional residue of shared vulnerability, performance, and late-night jam. But no amount of analysis quite explains the way this place wraps around you, like memory, like fog, like something breathing just beyond the edge of ordinary dot. And when the time finally comes to leave, no one rushes. Suitcases are packed quietly. Coats are buttoned with care. You notice guests pausing to touch the banisters, the walls, the windowsills, just small gestures of goodbye. As if the house itself might notice. At the front door, Liriope bids each of you farewell. To Agnes, she says, "Next time bring the bell." To Ellis, "Your quartz was listening, but maybe let it rest." To you, "Don't wait too long to write it down." You nod. Then she adds, barely above a whisper, "And next time, try the fig." You don't answer. You just smile. Outside, the day is warm, the gravel crunches beneath your feet, and the world feels slightly brighter than it should. You turn once, just once, and glance back. The curtains don't move, but the dog is watching. You're on the train now. Your suitcase tucked beneath your seat, your coat folded beside you, the envelope still nestled in your pocket like a sleeping moth. The countryside slips past the window in slow, dreamy blurs of green and gold. You watch it without really seeing, your mind still partially lodged in candlelight and quiet knocks on the underside of antique tables. Agnes sits across the aisle, scribbling furiously in a small red notebook titled Important Psychic Impressions. Breakfast notes. Ellis, one row behind, has taken out his portable pendulum rig. It clinks softly every time the train turns. You stare out the window and wonder how much of what happened was real. Not just the seance, or the footsteps behind you during the midnight walk, or the echoing chime that answered Liriope's map ritual, but the feeling strange, electric, and undeniable that someone else had noticed you. That someone or something recognized your presence and appreciated it. That's a hard sensation to explain, much less prove. Historians still argue whether the Victorian obsession with ghost hunting was about genuine belief or just an elaborate form of grief therapy dressed up in lace and ectoplasm. Whether those carefully choreographed seances and long weekends at haunted manors were attempts to make peace with death, or simply to make sense of it, you're not sure it matters anymore. A man with a tea trolley passes through. You order something herbal, something vaguely floral, and wrap your fingers around the warm cup as if it might help keep the memory of the house from slipping too far away. You remember the scent of the seance room wax, herbs, and something like ozone. The way Liriope spoke without quite opening her eyes. The voice that said, "This is my table." The bell shattering like a whisper losing patience. You remember the envelope under your pillow and the question, whose name did you forget? It's still there, lingering like an unanswered letter. You tilt your head against the window. A flicker of movement catches your eye, not outside, but in the reflection. Just for a second, you think you see someone standing behind you, watching. You turn. There's no one there. Just Ellis, still clinking. Just Agnes, still scribbling. Just you, holding a cup of tea that's begun to cool. The train moves forward. Later, you arrive home. Your house feels a bit too bright. Your bed too soft, your mirrors a little too clean. You unpack your bag slowly, setting aside each object with reverence. Your smudging bundle, still unlit. Your crystal pendulum, a little tangled but otherwise intact. A spoon you don't remember. Packing. It looks older than your kitchen. You leave it on the counter and pretend not to wonder. You hang your coat, and from the pocket falls a folded piece of paper. Not the envelope. Not the message card. A new paper. You pick it up careful. Almost nervous. It's folded into a neat square, crisp as if it had just been written. On it, in small, tight handwriting, you listened. That's rarer than belief. Keep listening. There's no signature dot. You sit down slowly, letting that sink in. Because in the noise of the world, the daily blur of headlines, appointments, pings and scrolls, listening is harder than it looks. Truly hearing something, someone, anything that takes quiet. It takes stillness. You think back to the garden path, the crunch of your boots, the shadows moving just outside the circle of candlelight, the way the air shifted when you noticed. Then not tried to see, not tried to catch, just notice. You remember how different that felt. You don't quite believe in ghosts. Not the bedsheet kind. Not the rattling chains or flickering light bulb kind. But you believe in impressions. In atmospheres. In memories so thick it echoes. You believe that people leave parts of themselves behind in places that mattered to them. In objects. In moments. In names half-whispered. Maybe that's what Harold was. Or maybe Harold was you. You pause. Sip the last of your tea. Outside, a crow lands on the fence, cocks its head, and lets out a single caw. You nod at it, because that feels like the polite thing to do. It nods back. You don't want to read too much into that. But later that night, you light the smudging bundle. Just to see how it smells. Lavender, rosemary. A hint of something like rain. You don't chant. You don't close your eyes. You just walk. Slowly through your house, letting the smoke curl along doorframes and windowsills. Just in case anyone's listening. The house doesn't answer, but it feels different afterward. Warmer, calmer, like someone knows you're home. It's been 3 days. And despite your best efforts, the feeling still hasn't left. It clings lightly, not like something malevolent, but more like a dream that's followed you into the grocery store. You catch yourself glancing over your shoulder when walking into a quiet room. You pause before flipping on lights, half expecting to find someone waiting politely in the dark, holding a broken bell. You start to notice things. Your hallway mirror sometimes shows a faint shimmer, not a figure, not a face. Just the suggestion that someone might be standing just out of frame. Your dog or cat or houseplant. You didn't have a pet before. But now something small and fuzzy seems to have adopted you. Stares at the same corner each night around 11:17 p.m., tail twitching rhythmically. And that spoon? Still on the counter. You try to move it. You want to move it, but every time you reach for it, you stop just short, like your hand has forgotten how to close. Like the air around it gets a fraction heavier. On the second night, you dream of the arbor again, the wrought iron, the moonlight, the stone path veined with moss. You walk through it, feel the grass cool beneath your bare feet, and hear the whisper of a voice that says, "You didn't look back. Thank you." You wake up with your pillow damp from tears. You don't remember shedding. It's fine. You're fine. Mostly. You decide to normalize things by going out for a walk. Nothing special, just around the block, headphones in, maybe a podcast. Something about grocery logistics or the history of spoons. You're about to press play when you spot something stuck in your front gate. A card, the same cream-colored stock. Same faint EMBOSSING. No envelope this time. It reads, "You're doing well." But don't ignore the knocking. You freeze. Look up and down the street. Nothing. Just a neighbor trimming hedges. A toddler launching a shoe into traffic. No one looking your way. You don't want to overreact. You take the card inside, fold it gently, place it in the envelope from the seance. You do not speak out loud. Not yet. Instead, you go to the library, the local one this time. No maps of psychic geography or dusty grimoires, but a nice selection of local histories and old property records. You don't really know what you're looking for. A name? A hint? Maybe a herald in your neighborhood? What you find is this slim, self-published book titled Echoes in Brick, Forgotten Stories from Oak Hill District. Inside, on page 17, you read about a house that used to stand just a few streets over. Torn down in the 1920s. Before that, it was used for spiritual rehabilitation and medium training by a group calling themselves the Listening Table Society. You blink. Your cup of library coffee is now cold. You snap a picture of the page. On the opposite side, someone's handwritten note reads, "They only come if you listen, not if you ask." You check the checkout record. No one's borrowed this book since 1989. Later that evening, you sit at your kitchen table with the spoon in front of you. You light a candle, not because you think it'll work, but because it somehow feels respectful. You clear your throat. "Okay," you say, "I'm listening." The candle flickers. The clock ticks. Then, from upstairs, knock, knock, pause. Knock. You stare at the ceiling. You do not move. "Okay," you repeat. "You have my attention." Nothing else happens that night, but you sleep better. 1 week passes. You go about your day's errands, dishes, messages left unanswered. Everything seems just slightly out of sync, like the world's tempo has shifted half a beat to the left and forgotten to tell your body. The knocking has stopped for now, but the feeling remains. You've started noticing patterns, repeating numbers on receipts, birds that show up in places they shouldn't, dreams that begin before you fall asleep. You start writing them down in a small notebook labeled "Definitely." "Not haunted," Agnes calls. Her voice is cheerful but brittle, like someone trying to convince herself she's not still hearing whispers through her radiator. "I've taken up watercolor," she says. "Yesterday I painted a staircase. It wasn't mine." Ellis sends a letter, an actual letter, in ink, sealed with wax shaped like a crow's foot. He reports active tremors in the mirror, scrying, field, and that he's considering a light banishment ritual, just for hygiene. You put his envelope on the fridge. It feels oddly comforting. One evening, while making tea, you glance at the spoon. It's gone. Not moved. Not misplaced. Just absent. You check the drawer, the sink, the spot by the window where it once sat like a small metallic sentinel. Nothing. The air feels slightly warmer. Not in a bad way, more like someone just left the room and took their coat of sadness with them. You smile. Just a little. That night, there's a package by your front door. No label. No note. Inside is a candle, pale gray with streaks of deep violet, and a folded slip of paper that reads, "You passed the test. Now host one." You sit on your porch steps for a long time, not out of fear, out of recognition. You understand now. It was never just about ghosts. It was about memory, about presence, about making space for the unnoticed. And now you're being asked to make space for others, to become the guide, the listener, the one who doesn't flinch when the mirror breathes. Begin preparations. You dig out the suitcase you packed for the seance weekend. You refill it, but differently this time. Not as a guest, but as a host. What goes in? A teapot that only whistles at night, a tin of loose lavender, rosemary, and peppermint, a deck of cards with one missing, 3 small stones that feel slightly heavier than they should, a notebook labeled "If Found." Please whisper. The candle you draft invitations. They're not fancy. Cream-colored cards, of course, but the message is simple. You are invited to an evening of memory and listening. Bring nothing but a story and an open door. You don't mention ghosts. You do not use the word seance. You do not explain what open door means. You send out 7 of them. 4 replies arrive within 2 days. One includes a feather. Another comes with no return address, but smells faintly of rose and salt. You begin to clean your house, not with bleach, but with intent. You open windows, rearrange chairs. You hang a mirror in the hallway, slightly off-center. You don't fix it. On the night of the gathering, you light the candle. Your guests arrive quietly. You recognize in their eyes the same blend of hesitation and curiosity you had not long ago. You greet them with warm cider and silence. No one speaks. Of the other world. No one has to. Instead, you all sit. You breathe. You listen. And when the candle flickers, not from draft, but from presence, you speak, not loudly, not commandingly, just this: who are you remembering tonight? And from somewhere, maybe from the fireplace, maybe from inside someone's heart, a voice replies, me. No one runs. No one screams. You listen, and the world tilts just slightly toward wonder. The room feels different now. Not haunted, not holy, just ready. The candle at the center of your table burns low and steady, its wax puddling into the shallow ceramic dish below. Around it, your guests sit quietly. Some have their eyes closed. One scribbles into a notebook with a pencil that clicks with every downstroke. Another smooths the hem of their sleeve over and over again, like they're folding something invisible into the fabric. You can feel it too, that almost magnetic stillness. That breathless pause the air takes when it's waiting for someone to say the thing they don't know how to say. You decide it's time. You reach under the table and bring out a box. It's simple. Wooden. Old enough that its corners are worn. Soft. On the lid is carved a single word: relics. You set it down gently. No drama. No velvet drapes or Latin chants. Just wood on wood. Wait, meeting, wait. I'd like to offer something, you say. You lift the lid. Inside are objects. Ordinary ones at first glance. A child's marble, cloudy and scuffed. A silver thimble. A coin that no longer matches any currency. A glass button with something like a flower trapped inside. A slip of ribbon that smells faintly of violet. These were left behind, you tell them. Not because someone forgot, but because someone remembered and needed to let go. Your voice barely stirs the air. They don't belong to me, but they're safe here, and if you'd like, you can add something of your own. No one moves at first. It's okay. It's not a game. It's a right, even if you've only just invented it. Even if you're still not sure whether you're following tradition or making it up as you go along. Eventually, the youngest guest, a woman in a moss-colored cardigan, stands. Her hands are trembling slightly. She places something inside the box. A small note, folded twice, sealed with thread. She sits back down. Doesn't say a word. Then someone else places a key, old iron, teeth-worn smooth. Then a scrap of cloth. Then a small pendant shaped like a pinnacone. Each time you feel the room shift. Not heavier, not darker. Just deeper. Historians still argue whether the objects left at seances, rings, handkerchiefs, photographs, were used to summon spirits or to anchor grief. Some say the items acted as spiritual fingerprints. Others claim they were simply emotional stand-ins, the last tangible threads of someone long gone. Either way, it's always the object that speaks first. And your little box, carved and quiet, is now full of whispers. You close it gently. Later, you'll bury it beneath the oldest tree in your backyard. Not to hide it, but to root it. To let memory live where things grow. You offer everyone a cup of warm lemon balm tea. It's soothing, grounding, tastes like quiet mornings and books you've read more than once. The candle flickers again. This time, no one reacts with surprise. You can feel them now, the listeners. Not watchers, not judges. Just presences that fill the negative space of the room like music in a cathedral. The kind of awareness that wraps around silence like a blanket. Not a threat. You whisper, more to yourself than to anyone else. Thank you for showing up. A breeze passes, yes. Inside, no open windows. Just that shift in air pressure that feels like breath. Ellis would say, "The veil is thin." Agnes would call it a visitation. You just call it enough. Your guests leave slowly. Hugs are softer than usual. Eye contact lasts longer. One man who hadn't spoken all night squeezes your shoulder on the way out and murmurs, "She remembered her name." You nod. You don't ask. As the door closes behind the last guest, you stand in the center of your home, surrounded by candlelight and empty teacups and the subtle rearrangements of a space that's been noticed. Your house is still your house, but it's also more. You lock the front door not because you're scared, just to mark the moment. And when you walk through the hallway toward your room, your steps echo just slightly off time, like someone's walking beside you. The next morning, everything is ordinary, which is suspicious. Your alarm chirps. The tea kettle works. Your slippers are exactly where you left them. The spoon that disappeared, still gone. But you've made peace with that now. It probably found its way home. You sit with your tea, staring at your front door. The space inside your chest feels different. Not lighter, just rearranged. Like someone tidied up your emotional attic and labeled the boxes. The sense of presence, of being watched, witnessed, maybe even quietly encouraged, hasn't left. But now it's less of an interruption and more like a companionable roommate who doesn't make eye contact before coffee. You receive a letter, real paper again. Cream-colored envelope, but this one's square and hand-delivered, slid under your door in the night. Inside is a single line. The next silence is yours to build. You exhale. This has become normal now. You no longer recoil at the weird. You lean into it. Over the next few weeks, your house shifts. Not dramatically, no blood writing on the walls or spontaneous Gregorian chanting. Just adjustments. Mirrors. Tilt by a degree or two. Plants start leaning toward corners that don't get sun. One drawer in your kitchen now hums, very softly, only when you boil water. You build a second box like the one from your first gathering. This one is smaller. Just for you. You fill it with scraps of your own memory. A button from a coat you left at a train station. A seashell with a hole in it. A photo of someone whose name you've finally remembered. The last page of a book you never finished. And a single spoon. No, not that spoon. Just a new one. You keep this box by your bed. You never open it, but knowing it's there is enough. People begin to reach out. A neighbor knocks one evening and asks awkwardly if you might know anything about gentle hauntings. She claims her piano plays one note at 2:07 a.m., always. The same one. You nod. Offer her tea. Listen. A friend emails and says, "I had a dream you were whispering to someone behind me." You write back, "I probably was." You become somehow the person who knows things without needing to explain them. You don't claim to be a medium. You don't hang crystals in your windows or burn sage every Tuesday at moonrise. You just listen. And people sense that. Historians still argue whether ghost stories were warnings or comforts, if they serve to keep people afraid or to help them grieve. Some scholars insist spiritualism was about illusion, about spectacle. Others see it as a deeply personal act of resistance, a way to assert that memory matters, that lives don't end when breathing stops. You don't have a theory, you have a candle, a journal, a door you keep unlocked just a little longer at night. One evening, while cleaning out a drawer, you find a note you didn't write. Don't forget to listen for her bell. You set it gently on your desk. And that night, at precisely 11:17 p.m., you hear it. A single chime. Not urgent. Not sad. Just there. You smile. Turn off the light. The candle by your bed flickers without breeze. You sleep without dreaming. At least none that you remember. Another month passes. By now, your life has quietly divided itself into two layers, the visible one and the listening one. You still go to the grocery store. You still pay bills. You still lose socks and argue with your streaming service when it buffers at the worst possible moment. But beneath all that, there's a rhythm now soft, steady, and inexplicable. You catch yourself humming melodies you don't remember learning. You walk past certain windows more slowly, as if someone might be waving. You pause before entering rooms, not out of fear, but to make space for whatever, or whomever, might be waiting. You've hosted 3 more gatherings, each one different at the second. A guest left behind a pair of dice that never land the same way twice. At the third, someone burst into tears after hearing their childhood nickname whispered from the corner of the room. No one admitted to saying it. The fourth was quieter, introspective. Guests left notes folded into origami birds and placed them on windowsills, as if giving the house little offerings to nibble on when no one was looking. You never promise experiences. Never claim results. You just set the tone, the silence. The door. And people come. At night, your dreams have grown stranger, less narrative, more resonant. It's not about what happens in them anymore. It's how they feel, like memories that never belonged to you. Like echoes trying to find their source. One dream lingers. You sit at a long wooden table, and across from you is a mirror. But in the reflection, you're not alone. A woman with ink-dark eyes sits beside you, her hand resting lightly on your shoulder. She says nothing, but you wake up with the clear thought, she remembers what I forgot. You write it down. Your journal is filling faster than ever. Not with theories, not with ghost stories, just patterns, words that return, shapes that recur. A soft language of coincidence that, by now, feels anything but coincidental. Ellis sends you a package. Inside is a smooth black stone and a note. Place this near the mirror. If it hums, write it down. You do as told. It hums 3 nights in a row. Agnes visits. She's different now, calmer. She's been painting still lifes of objects that don't exist, mirrors that reflect someone else's windows, clocks with no hands, cups that seem to remember being touched. I think, she says over tea, that we're part of something now, like custodians, or stewards, or memory librarians. You nod. It sounds right. The spoon returns. One morning, you open the cutlery drawer, and there it is. Same shape, same odd weight. You pick it up gently, turn it over in your palm. There's a small scratch on the handle now. It reads, "You kept listening." You place it in a small wooden dish on your desk. You don't use it, you just keep it near. Historians still argue whether objects can be haunted, whether memory has mass, whether belief changes physics or simply the way we see physics. They debate whether spiritualism was a fraud or a new kind of science, an effort to understand something we never had language for. You don't argue, you just keep setting the table. One afternoon, you hear knocking, not the urgent, demanding kind, the curious kind. Like fingertips tapping politely against the veil, you pause, close your eyes, and say gently, "I'm here." No voice replies, but the wind shifts. A picture falls from your bookshelf, not crashing, just settling, as if nudged by an unseen fingertip. You pick it up. It's one of your oldest family photos. But there's something new in it, someone standing. In the background, a shadow, a blur, a suggestion. You smile, just slightly. You've stopped asking whether any of it is real. Not because you've found a definitive answer, but because the question no longer matters. Reality as you now understand it has layers. One of them is bills and weather forecasts. One is coffee. One is the feeling you get when someone calls your name from another room, and you live alone. And one is this, that something remembered you, and keeps remembering. Your house has settled into its new identity. It still creaks in the night, but now those creaks feel like footfalls rather than complaints. The hallway mirror has taken to fogging up in curious patterns when no one's showered. One looks suspiciously like a spiral. Another resembles a key. You don't wipe them away anymore. You wait until they fade on their own. You've become Well, let's say trusted. Not in a flashy way. No one's writing articles. You're not giving TED Talks titled The Sympathetic Spoon and other ghostly tales. But people find you. Not through marketing, but word-of-mouth whispers pass between people who once found a note tucked into a book, or who woke from a dream that smelled like violets and wood smoke. Your fifth gathering includes someone who arrives with no name, just a book, bound in leather, filled with blank pages. They place it on your table and say, "I was told to bring this here." The pages begin to fill before the night is over. You no longer explain what's happening. You simply provide the space. The candle. The question, who are you remembering tonight? You receive offerings in the mail, now unmarked packages containing small objects, a cracked compass, a single glove, a music box that plays only when no one is looking directly at it. You catalog them quietly, respectfully. Some go into your garden. Some go into the relics box. Some disappear before you can decide. One night, you find a note on your pillow. Different handwriting this time, looped, old-fashioned. Ink smudged like someone nervous had folded it with damp fingers. "We remember too." Your name is said kindly. "Here." You place it under the candle on your bedside table. Let the wax drip across it slowly, sealing it like a letter to the unseen. You find yourself talking aloud more these days. Not in madness, in companionship. "Let me know if you need anything," you whisper while rearranging the chairs. "Not today, thank you." You murmur when the mirror hums just slightly too loud. "I'm still listening," you say when the wind rattles the back door with no storm in sight. Sometimes nothing answers. Sometimes a light flickers. You've made peace with the ambiguity. That there may never be proof. That maybe the only certainty is how it feels. And it feels like care, like curiosity, like old grief curling into new comfort. Historians still argue whether spiritualism died out because science disproved it, or because science never tried to understand what the movement actually meant to the people who believed. Whether seances were theater or theology, whether ghosts were real or whether the need for ghosts was, you've stopped needing the arguments. Have the candle. You have the names. You have the knocking. You have the quiet. You keep your door open, just a little, every night. Not wide enough for danger, just wide enough for memory. And now, as you settle beneath your covers, the last candle flickering in the corner, you hear it, a single chime. Then silence, then very faintly a breath, like someone leaning close, and a whisper, barely audible, not from your ears but from the bones in your chest. You passed it on. You smile. Eyes closed, and drift.
You stay lying on the stone slab, your hands folded across your chest like a reclining scribe. The stars pulse above you, steady, quiet, eternal. They don't twinkle here. The air is too dry. They simply burn with the kind of confidence that comes from being used as a nightly clock for thousands of years. But you're not sleeping, not yet. You're still caught in this hour, the 10th or maybe the 11th of the night, where everything feels softer. The wind has gennelled, the jackals have gone quiet, and the torches near the necropolis gate flicker low, like the city's heartbeat has slowed to a lull. And in this hush, one question creeps into your mind like a shadow from the doorway. What did time feel like to someone dying in ancient Egypt? You sit up slowly and walk toward the tombs. Not the grand pyramids, they're off on the horizon, but a necropolis of nobles and artisans. Their moss daubers neat and earth-colored, carved with prayers and portraits. Death for the Egyptians wasn't an end. It was a transition into a different kind of time. Remember those time words from earlier? Jet and Nea. Well, in the tomb, they take on real weight. Nea is the time of the living, cyclical, seasonal, active. You wake, you eat, you plant, you worship, you sleep, over and over. Jet is the time of the dead, still, eternal, unchanging. It's the time of memory, of names carved in stone, of offerings repeated endlessly, quirky detail, Egyptian tombs. often included false doors, stone slabs carved to resemble real entryways. Through them, the spirit of the deceased was believed to enter the world of the living and receive food, incense, and words. Those doors weren't metaphors, they were scheduling devices. You offered food at the appropriate ritual hour, believing the soul would return on cue to receive it. Tomb inscriptions even specified morning bread, midday beer, evening incense time didn't stop for the dead. It just shifted. And for the elite, it shifted into a personalized eternity. You might commission a tomb calendar, a list of feast days, lunar observations, and rituals to be performed in perpetuity. Priests or family members were paid in advance to carry these out. Historians still debate how many of these rituals were truly sustained across generations, but some records suggest that hundreds of years later, certain tombs still received offerings. Imagine that, your birthday celebrated 5 centuries after your death, because your family's trust fund was well organized. Even more intriguing, some tombs had books of hours, painted inside guides to help the soul navigate the 12 hours of night. Like a GPS for the afterlife, the tomb of Nefertari, Queen of Ramses II, is perhaps the most famous. Its walls are covered with scenes from the Book of the Dead, the Book of Gates, and more. Each hour is depicted in vivid detail. The soul moves through serpents, guardians, and rivers of fire, and is reborn with the morning sun. It's a story, yes, but also a schedule. The Egyptians didn't just believe in an afterlife. They structured it, planned it, timed it. They understood that in a world where the sun dies and is reborn every day, the soul could do the same, but only if it kept good time. You rest a hand on the wall of a modest tomb. The carving is simple. A man seated before a table piled with bread, beer, onions, and goose. Beneath it are hieroglyphs listing his name, titles, and the prayer, "May you give bread, beer, and joy in every season, in every hour, for all eternity." It's not flashy, but it's timeless. A promise etched in stone that even in the stillness of death, time continues not just through rituals and calendars, but through memory, name, and story. You look back toward the horizon. It's nearly dawn. A thin thread of blue glows behind the hills, and somewhere, far below the earth, Ra is reaching the 12th hour, the last gate, the last challenge. He's almost ready to rise. The sun slips lower, its arc melting into the edge of the world. The sky becomes a gradient flame at the horizon, violet above, deepening into navy as the first stars cautiously appear. You're still by the riverbank, now sitting cross-legged among stalks of wild papyrus. There's something hushed about this hour. Not silence exactly. Frogs croak, the wind stirs. Distant drums begin to murmur, but a shared pause, as if the whole city is waiting for what comes after sunset. Because now you're entering the realm of the 12 hours of the night. This is where things get mysterious, symbolic, and let's be honest, a little weird. If daytime in Egypt was ruled by sunlight and ceremony, the night belonged to gods, demons, dreams, and the dead. You follow a group of robed priests as they leave the temple and make their way to a small chapel near the edge of the necropolis. It's simple in design but richly painted inside. You enter behind them, and there on the walls is an astonishing sight, the Hamduat, the book of what is in the underworld. It's like a comic strip of the night journey, carved in ochre, lapis, and gold. Here's Ra, the sun god, in his solar boat, sailing beneath the earth. And here's each hour of the night, personified as a landscape.
Let yourself rest now. You've journeyed far through candlelight and whispers, through creaking floorboards and folded notes, through memories that never quite belonged to you but somehow still knew your name. Let the details fade gently now. The velvet chairs, the mirrored hallway, the spoon, the names spoken and unspoken. Let them dissolve, not into forgetting, but into soft storage like books placed carefully back on a shelf, waiting for the next reader to come. Breathe in. Feel. The quiet settle around you like fog on old garden stones. Each inhale, a release. Each exhale, a small, necessary goodbye to the day. You're safe here. No knocking, no questions, just presence. The kind that doesn't ask for anything. The kind that simply is. Let your thoughts drift like candle smoke then, curling, unhurried. There's no need to remember now. No need to analyze or trace patterns. The story has been told. The echoes have quieted. And the silence you've built, the one you shaped so gently and patiently, is holding you now. The room is dim, is still, and the last sound you hear is your own breath, steady, soft, and enough. Good night. You're home now.